events in Herat took place in the wider context of unrest against the socialist reforms implemented by the DRA, or the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, one of which was the principle of agrarian reforms. The reforms, besides contradicting traditions and the principles of Islam, in many cases actually worsened the situation of the rural poor they were supposed to reward, right? Starting in May 1978 in Nordistan, spontaneous uprisings took place throughout Afghanistan. Starting in May 1978 in Nordistan, spontaneous uprisings took place throughout Afghanistan against the DRA and its policies. The agrarian reforms that had taken place near Herat without any opposition, as there was little solidarity between the rural farmers and the big landowners who mostly lived in the city. In this case, the repression was carried out by the cult faction against the religious dignitaries, including Pir and Ulema, and the traditional elites, is cited as a critical factor, as well as the government's literacy campaign, which became controversial due in particular to the inclusion of communist propaganda in the literacy courses, as well as the practice of mixed gender classes. So in the Herat province, isolated revolts had already taken place, but the uprising began in earnest on the 15th of March 1979. In the surrounding districts, the insurgents gathered around mosques and, following the preachings of their mullahs, marched on to the city, where they were joined by many townsmen in attacking government buildings and symbols of communism. The 17th Division of the Afghan army were on detail by the regime to put down the rebellion, but this proved to be a mistake, as there were very few Caliphs or the Caliphs in this particular unit, and instead they mutinied and even joined the uprising themselves. A small group of soldiers and officials and even Calic activists withdrew to the city's Blue Mosque. The insurgents held Herat for about a week. During which the city underwent a period of anarchy. Rioters roamed the streets chanting Allahu Akbar, searching for government supporters and Salutis, or those with uncovered heads, indicating the lack of punity. Communist officials, in particular teachers, literacy teachers, were to be given, and they were massacred on the spot. The bazaar was looted and several Soviet advisors to the DRA were killed, though other foreigners were spared as long as you didn't speak that Cyrillic alphabet. The exact numbers of the Soviets killed during the events is still uncertain. Certain sources cite a figure as high as 200, but according to the official Soviet source, there were only about 2 victims. Former DRA sources indicate that 3 to 4 Soviets were killed, possibly even with their families. According to certain sources that might be certainly sourced but not verified, the bodies of the dead advisors were paraded around the city by the rebels, but this is denied by another source that the other source probably sourced from that source, which probably sourced from the DRA source. I made this joke 400 times and I'm gonna stick to it. The rebels did not really have a unified leadership. On the military side, the mutineers were led by a group of officers under Shagan Janga and Rashul Baluk, which also included Ismail Khan and Abdulladin Khan, or Alaluddin Khan, who were associates of the Jamaat-e-Islami party. Ismail Khan would later become the Amir of the Jamaat-Islami forces in the Herat province, and a major Mujaheddin commander. He did not really play a leading role in this revolt, as was later claimed by his supporters and even him for PR support from the United States invasion, but those are stories for another day. So among the civilian insurgents, the situation was a bit more confusing. Though some local figures played a significant role, like Guru Muhammad, a Barak Ghazi Pashtun from the Gozahar region, and Kamar Aidoza and Shir al-Ga Shoganga, which were 2 former convicts no less, who actually led large groups of insurgents, probably to the bazaar. The rebellion overran the districts around Herat except for the Ubair and the Pashtun Gazhun, where the government command post had actually held out, but still, it still spread a few days later to the Bagish province and then on to other neighboring provinces in the region. After the initial shock of losing a major city and the defection of a whole division, the DRA, or the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, reacted ruthlessly. The 4th and the 15th Armored Brigades were sent from Herat Prison, but due to the distance they had to travel, Havinzullah Hamin ordered Major General Sayyid Mukammadam, commander of the Kadar garrison, to send an armored force that could reach Herat faster. Muhammadam's column of 30 tanks and 300 men arrived at Herat on the 20th of March, 1979, waving green flags and Qurans, which indicated and induced the insurgents to believe that the rebellion had spread to the whole country. The Khalid troops were then thus allowed to pass and recaptured the city. The government forces then subjected Herat to an aerial bombardment with the Ilishna Il-28 bomber, flying from the Sadadan air base, during which the city was heavily damaged and thousands of Heratis were killed. Though the exact death toll is still uncertain, the lowest estimate runs from 3,000 to 4,000 dead, while in the higher cases it is estimated to reach 25,000. During 1992, a mass grave was uncovered containing 2,000 bodies of those killed by DRA repression. So the events in Herat caused the Soviet leadership to realize that the Afghan allies were in some deep shit and in some deep crisis. Repeated demands from Nur Muhammad Taraki, president of the DRA, for Soviet military assistance in quelling the revolts prompted a series of secret Politburo meetings. One such meeting took place on the 17th of March 1979, during which Foreign Minister Duromiko acknowledged that the DRA faced thousands of insurgents, but in accordance with the Brezhnev Doctrine, asserted that the fundamental position that under no circumstances may we lose Afghanistan. Another Politburo member, Alexander Kosygin, expressed the distrust in the DRA leadership, stating that Amin and Taraki alike are concealing the true state of affairs from us. In a telephone conversation with Kosygin the following day, Taraki complained. In a telephone conversation with Kosygin the following day, Taraki complained that he could no longer rely on the Afghan armed forces, even those that were trained in the Soviet Union no less, and that his pleas for help became more desperate, more pressing, and even just flat out crazy. He requested that the Soviet soldiers from the Soviet republics of Central Asia, many of which inhabited the same ethnic groups that were found in Afghanistan, could be smuggled into Afghanistan in the Afghan grab. However, these requests were to no avail, and the Politburo initially moved forward with the policy. Of non-intervention, which was later validated by Leonid Brezhnev when Taraki visited Moscow on the 20th of March. Kosygin explained to him the Soviet policy regarding Afghanistan. We carefully studied all aspects of this action and came to the conclusion that if our troops were introduced, the situation in your country would not improve, but would worsen. One cannot deny that our troops would have to fight not only foreign aggressors, but also with a certain number of your people, and people do not forget such things. So, however, the Soviets did increase their military assistance. In the following months by sending large quantities of equipment, including the T-62 tank, the MiG-21 fighter, the Mi-24 helicopter, along with extra advisors to service and security personnel to security them. Despite this, the situation in the Afghan armed forces continued to deteriorate. Despite this, the situation of the Afghan armed forces continued to deteriorate, with mutinies occurring in Jalalabad, Arsam, Gozhan-Nihi, and in August 1979, the Herat Uprising in the fortress in Kabul, or the Herat Uprising in the fortress in Kabul. Though these were all put down, the weakness of the military contributed to the significant spread of the insurgents. And on the 24th of December 1979, under Leonid Brezhnev, the Soviet Union deployed the 40th Army, commencing the start of this Soviet-Afghan war. So anyway guys, hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time. So the